Welcome to our, let's see, this is our first meeting of 2025. So of the Graduate Medical Education Board, we have some folks online. So welcome and welcome to everyone in the room. We have some public members and board members. So good to see everyone. So I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order and ask Lucas if he wouldn't mind doing the roll call with determining our quorum.
Angie Zagel,
Present.
Dr. Cliff Knight,
Here.
Eric Davis.
Here.
I see him. There he is. All right. Dr. Grice will not be joining us today. Dr. Choi.
Here.
Okay. Kelly Colick will not be joining us today, nor Dr. Gepke. Dr. Shockley.
Hello. Here.
Okay. Rob McClin will not be with us today. Dr. Becker.
Here. I'm here.
Thank you, sir.
Also here.
Okay, so we have 6, so that should be a quorum.
Okay, fantastic. Let's go ahead and, first item on the agenda today is to review our minutes from last time. And Lucas circulated those in the packet that you all received in there. So just comments, edits, revisions. If not, I'll entertain a motion. Oops, thank you, to approve the minutes. All right, any discussion? All in favor of approving our minutes from our October meeting, say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved, thank you. Okay, new business. I think we have to address every year the role of my role as chair or that position, so I'll turn that over to our team at the commission.
Could you explain the process a little bit?
Yeah, so the board has, I believe since its inception, operated under a 1-year chairship. So that cycle commences at the start of each year. And so do we have okay, perfect. So we do have a quorum. Prior to vote.
Audit to vote.
You need a.
Yeah, do we just want to open it up, right, for anyone who would.
Yeah, if there's anyone else who would like to nominate another member or self-nominate, that's available.
Just offering.
I'll second Dr. Hearn, yes.
And I think,
Do I have
I
to
guess-
offer the motion or was the chair?
I have no clue.
Yeah,
Do we have a vice chair?
We don't.
we've never had a vice chair.
I
as
think
part
a
of the
motion
board,
to
but-
approve.
All right. All right. So there's a motion to approve. Was there a second? Or Dr. Choi motion? Second, Dr. Knight? Okay, great. And then, I guess,
Yeah, all in favor.
all in favor?
Aye.
Oh, okay, so say aye.
That looks pretty unanimous.
Okay, that was a little awkward, but we got through it. Okay, thank you so much.
Work on that for next year.
That's okay, no worries. No, it's part of the formal process that we have to go through every year, so thank you. And I look forward to, another year serving as your chair, so thank you. Okay, other new business for today. So we're on our new calendar cycle that we've been on for about, roughly the past year. And that puts the business of today's meeting on reviewing the program development reports, the reports that those programs have sent back to us. Lucas did a nice job reaching out to those specific programs and getting some feedback on their current progress. And then should they be in the right timing, then we would kind of guide them toward the expansion grants for ongoing grant support should they so choose. So I'll turn it over to Lucas to run through these progress reports.
All right. Make sure I am sharing the screen with the virtual members. Virtual members, are you able to see that? Okay, great. So this should pretty much be the same format of grant report that we had, or the board had last year. And there are 3 grants that will be focused on today. The first is Methodist Hospital Family Medicine based in Gary. This was approved in November 2023. This will be finishing this year. Not ACGME approved as of yet, but looks like it was submitted pretty recently. The one outlier I would say for this grant compared to the other two is that they still have quite a bit of their money remaining. So I've been in contact with their program coordinator, Andrea Williams. And so we've had some discussions on how to spend that down, before it got to the board by the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, 2025. There are quite a lot of details about their program development and director development. Would the board like me to read through those? I also will send this out. I just don't want to spend too much time on it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just clarify, they have submitted their application to my office. We have not yet approved to send to ACGME. There are several steps, I think, just from the perspective of it's restarting a new program and things like that, but it will get submitted to the ACGME in hopes of being approved.
Okay. Perfect. Yep, so a little bit of a narrative there. This was the budget that they had submitted. Like I said, there wasn't a whole lot to report as of yet. So the board can expect something. Honestly, I'll probably put something together for our next meeting, just for a little bit more insight on what this looks like. No significant challenges reported. And then the second point, what Dr. Choi just shared with us. Okay.
I think one thing from a family medicine perspective that they have had challenges with and we have resolved, but the availability of pediatrics training, particularly inpatient pediatrics training statewide, is pretty limited. And so as we consider new family medicine residencies in particular, I think that's going to be a bigger problem than we'd like it to be. So.
I would comment, thankfully, the ACGME loosened some of those rules with the last iteration for family medicine. So there is a lower requirement for PEDS education. They took away a month of it this last time.
Yes, there's just not that many inpatient units statewide. One of the advantages that we actually have is that the pediatrics program requirements decrease the pediatrics. So that if there's a PEDS program, they're hungry for more inpatient workers. And so Methodist Family Medicine will have to come to Riley actually to do their PEDS outpatient. Or PEDS. As well, we're accommodating our own programs first, but just I think as we think about just and
there's also competition with medical students too, because they all need those experiences. So they trying to think outside the box and using maybe NICU experiences, ER experiences, things like that have been kind of successful ways to augment some of it.
I think nationally, that continues to be the #1 citation that family medicine residencies receive. Are number 1 and 2 are usually PEDS and OB.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can we, just look at can we go back to the timing of this? So they're not expected to
they're not going to recruit for 25.
recruit for 25, so that would be 26. Would be the first time they could apply for, in theory, an
Okay,
expansion
yeah.
grant, right? So
Yeah.
there's gonna be like, almost like a gap here for them. Does that seem?
Which hasn't, that has happened before, so
Yeah.
that's not new. So I'm glad that Dr. Choi was able to provide that insight.
Okay.
All right, any questions on that? That was the few slides for that first program.
Yeah, and that helps us with timing and projecting out the future of some of the expansion grant applications we expect to get.
That's a good point. Okay. Next would be, internal medicine, IUSM Bloomington. Based in Bloomington, approved for funding in October 2021. I believe this, program had a little bit of a delay that the board, discussed and approved. 2 programs that follow this. Application originally submitted 12/17/2024, set to run through the next year. The one point between this and the next program is the funds have been fully spent. So that is something I am glad to see that that's been pushed all the way through by June 30th.
And
Program.
they have going back, they had 3 years, it looks like.
Mhm,
We
yeah.
extended them a year.
Mhm. Dr. Wilson and TestWorks are their notable contacts for that. This was the professional development timeline that they provided with us. I don't totally know what it's all talked about in there, but that's what they reported for us. Yes.
I can fill in those details too. They have a site visit February 5th. They will also be recruiting for a class to start in 26.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
This is the budget that they had submitted. And if I haven't already, I'll send all this out to the board to look at this more deeply. And then they reported delay in finding Dr. Wilson as their significant challenge for this program. So, any questions, any other things to point out before we move on to this third program? These are pretty brief updates. Okay. The outcome that they provided us with. And I would also ask if the board is noting anything that might be missing from this report. I'm happy to program that in for the next round or 26 now, I guess. And then emergency medicine, very similar. Originally approved in 2021. Funds have been fully invoiced. Dr. Choi.
Well, let me give you the update on that one.
Okay.
They actually had their initial site visit and did not get approved. The program director, Dr. Humbert, was the previous program director at here in Indy, and has essentially started the program, laid the groundwork. They have sort of a program director in waiting, and she didn't meet all the criteria, and Butch met the criteria, but was not credentialed there. That was anticipated because she will meet the criteria when the residents actually arrive. The ACGME did not like that, and so they withheld accreditation on the first round. And they also didn't necessarily like it that they were going to be the only program in the hospital. Again, it used to be a requirement for EM to also have another program in the same building. And that's not necessarily a requirement, but nonetheless, they sort of are holding us to that. So they have had their second site visit, we resubmitted. Bush has credentials, he actually works there, it's, a bit more eyes fully dotted with dark print, and so I don't anticipate any troubles, but their program, I think the EM programs are great, and the EM and IM programs are going to be really good, so I'm excited about them. I'm sad the ACGME, made us slow down, but whatever, we'll get there.
Yeah, so all of these will start in 26.
26, yeah.
So that will put a significant, I don't know what number of learners that is or residents, but that for our projecting,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay. Great. Submitted budget. The initial challenge. And then the outcome that they reported for us. So a brief update, but those are the 3 programs that will be finishing here this fiscal year. So any questions, any discussion before we move on to the next item? Anyone online? Don't want to forget people that are there. Bring none. Okay. Great. And I think we're ready for the next item on the agenda. Dr. Green.
Yeah, so the next item on today's agenda is to talk about the scoring subcommittee. Lucas gathered a small group of us, Dr. Knight, Dr. Becker, Dr. Shockley, myself. We went through the scoring matrix because, as we have come upon the time where now the amount of grant requests that we have are exceeding our current appropriations. The scoring matrix, which is, I think, pretty solid, but yet has some limitations, and we wanted to try to address those and make sure they were shored up as much as we could as we potentially go into the future where the scoring matrix will really determine which awards go to which program. Which has not necessarily been a driver or a tool that we've had to lean on that heavily yet, because all of our grants we have been able to successfully fund up to now. But looking to the future, that is a little bit more in question. And so I think the overall, and I invite Dr. Knight, Dr. Shockley, Dr. Becker to chime in here as well as Lucas. Some of the things that we spoke about was making the scoring much more objective than subjective. We have a couple buckets that are very vague in terms of, what is a collaborative, and that's 20 points
Mhm.
for that
Sure.
portion of the score. And the strength of the application are probably the two most subjective portions of our scoring matrix. And so what we wanted to bring to the group today was just the subcommittee's initial thoughts and get your reactions. Lucas is going to present some of the recommendations thus far. And, you know, we've got a little time. We don't have to necessarily make a motion today. If there's some more recommendations from the board, and then we can further refine it. We probably would want to approve next meeting any updated scoring matrix, so that as we go into July, which is our time when we really are going to have all of those expansion grants, you know, one to the other, sort of competing for each other, potentially depending on the fiscal situation, that, you know, we have a little time to get feedback. I think that's the main goal today, is to get feedback and help us refine as we look through what the subcommittee talked about. Any of our subcommittee members want to add to that? I think Lucas will run through the matrix here.
Yeah, so I believe there are, 5 recommendations, that the committee had come up with. The first 2 are probably the most consequential and impactful. The first being, the section involving a collaborative approach, such as the consortium, FQHC, hospital system, critical access hospital, or other. Currently, it's up to the discretion of the evaluator, up to 20 points. The committee proposed making this a tiered system and defining what those eligible collaborations are, so that, you know, if one application has an FQHC and a critical access hospital, they can receive 10 points. Up to 15, anything beyond that is just cherry on top. This would also decrease that score by 5 points. You'll see later on, one of the lower recommendations is making all the applications an even 100, then having 2 of them 105. That would also fill that objective. So currently, the list that I have for involving a collaborative approach, critical access, FQHC, behavioral health provider, a medical school, or a rural environment, can award up to 15 points. Happy to accept feedback or thoughts from the board.
We need to be more specific than a rural environment. Wonder, because I'm not sure, what did we mean by that? Just that they were in a rural setting? Or was it rural health centers, I wonder? Yeah, a partnership with a rural.
I'm trying, I can't recall. Yeah, we can refine it however we want. Yeah, to make it as specific.
And I think that's the objective of this discussion today, is to really hash out
Yeah, what other partners are we? what do we
Yeah.
Not include that you all would think.
Well, do you want to specify or just say other that provide, you know, clinical experience and then have the application support? Just so it's,
What I heard from the committee was that the goal is that the applicant can pretty much determine what their score will be when they submit it. So
Yeah.
just trying to be as clear as possible.
Yeah, but
So
but
whatever.
we do have that other score, right, that is based on the density of the providers in that area, and so there's that underserved.
Yep.
So we don't probably just want to say rural or underserved, because I think that other score may be all getting at that, am I, so I.
And perhaps just for reference, this is what the board, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for you. This is the outline of the current application. So program is in an underserved area that's determined by the Robert Wood Foundation. The population to physician ratio, that is the second pre-calculated. Involving a collaborative approach, this is what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Priority score for 5-year or newer programs, predetermined, and then strength of application. So those are the components. This is where we're focused at today.
Yeah, likely the first 2 will get to it to some degree. Though you could be in a urban center and get some higher points for that, but just as underserved. But it likely hits the rural part pretty hard. So do we want to double dip that, triple dip that?
Right.
For the rural part.
So we could, based on feedback, unless others have dissenting opinion, we could take out that bullet. That role.
Environment.
Yep, so then I would have 4, critical access, FQHC, behavioral health provider, and medical school.
And they just, to get all the points, they just need at least 3.
3.
But I think we could add rural health center, because that's different than.
It is different
And so, but I think that that's a good collaboration. And then some of the rural communities, I believe, have like a foundation, have foundations in their communities. And I can see a partnership with a local foundation as being a good sign that you got support from the community that you're in, and would be an important collaboration. So I think that maybe we need to have sort of a other and let them fill it in, and then we can sort of vet that if it's something we aren't thinking of now. I don't know.
Well, I was also thinking about the rural areas and I'm still trying to get to know different residency programs all throughout the state. Mind you, my frame of reference is primarily Valley County, but in the rural areas, would it be harder for residency programs to find the 3 collaborators? You know, I mean, is that a barrier just because of where a program might be geographically?
Me, it's sort of an indicator of why they need more collaboration.
Exactly, but if they, but
Shows
if they're.
that they're thinking of who else can we work with to make sure we have the resources we need to be able to
But
support.
that would be, for me, a reason to put in other categories.
Oh, yeah.
See what I'm saying?
And let-
And let us give them points if they demonstrated thinking outside the box to meet a rural need, because it may not be already existing.
Because it could be another hospital, not necessarily a critical access hospital, but if you're in a community that has a couple of different health systems,
Be a smaller
you
community.
may need to rely on the other health system for your geriatrics or your mental health or something, experiences. And so being able to say you've got a collaboration with an adjacent health system or hospital might, that sort of, I think, meets that spirit as well.
I was wondering a little bit from a rural standpoint, where people are underserved already and the physician to patient ratio is low. Is there capacity to teach, and how do we assess that? I realize it's a long-term investment, but it's in the moment. We have to make sure that.
I think we
That
kind of
you can-
relied on whether they get ACG accreditation and meet the requirements, rather than us trying to make a determination of whether they're gonna be able to meet the requirements. Because I think if, as long as they meet ACG requirements, I don't think it's our place to say, well, we don't think they're gonna be successful, so we're not gonna fund them. If they already meet ACG requirements. But
That push and pull that you're talking about, though, I do hesitate sometimes, are they gonna be able to give a quality education? I don't know, it seems like we need to sort of trailblaze forward, though, or we're probably never gonna move the needle.
But I think that's where sending the message that you gotta have some collaboration.
Support.
Because
Right,
if you're trying to do this all on your own,
you're not gonna,
it's less likely. And hopefully using the Discovery Grant, they come up with that decision before they actually move forward with, but sometimes it's not till the program development stage
Yeah.
where they recognize that.
And, you know, they don't have to get 15 points to get an award either. I mean, they could get, especially, you know,
Yeah.
they don't, it's not a requirement to fulfill all those 15 points. It'll make their application more stronger, obviously, but it's still very possible that someone will get through with less than 3 collaborators.
Dr. Becker, he was.
Yeah, Steve, do you have anything else to add? No. I don't know if you can hear us. Dr. Becker, can you hear us? You're on mute.
I say my.
It froze
There
for
you-
a second. Sorry, I'm back. No, I think the key is to have something that is somewhat measurable. And, in my own personal view, I think the rural areas, such underserved as it is in our state, that we definitely have to have that as a major category. But I did like, we discussed of trying to leave it somewhat open so that different kinds of collaborations that maybe we hadn't thought of could be included. I'm not sure this one is right there yet. I think we need some more work on it.
Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like there's general agreement though to refine that a little bit and maybe have another category or some other criteria better defined, but people are, you guys in general like the more objective approach for this scoring.
And is the board comfortable, with the tiered, rather than just giving the score?
Okay.
To Dr. Kern's point though, no one has ever gotten a perfect score, I think, coming through on our scoring system. So for somebody to get under that probably is not gonna keep them out.
Yeah, right. I mean, clearly, if things get more competitive, it will feel different, but hopefully, there's wiggle room for not a perfect score.
Okay. The next recommendation of the board, was to kind of, I guess, solidify and confirm what, strength of application or completeness of application looks like. So this is the second area that the board has discretion over. Let's pull this sheet back up just for reference. So this is the final area, up to 20 points. And so essentially, the way I've interpreted it is how many letters of support or different documents are included in that application. And so I think, for the grantees or the applicants, perhaps there's not a whole lot of clarity on what that actually looks like, what the scoring basis is. It was proposed to the board that, they define what those actual documents are. So a letter from the DIO, for example, and also do a tiered system up to 20 points on acceptable documents.
Yeah, so here I think we want to talk about, it would be the checklist items that,
Yeah, I think we feel less complete on this one than we did on
For
the
sure.
previous one. Again, the concept was, at least for me, having scored these for a few years, I always feel like I get to this one and I'm like, is this a 15 or a 17 or I don't, it's like, and so just trying to be more defined in how you earn those 20 points.
Yeah.
Again, so that when you're putting the application in, if what we expect is a letter from medical staff leadership, hospital administration, somebody in the community, we should sort of be able to put all those things in, and that way people aren't guessing, well, who do I need to show the support from, or that we're down the road where we need to be at this point. So I guess that's the question, is what from a completeness standpoint would we expect in this, knowing that a couple of recommendations down, we're limiting it to 50 pages so that we don't get any more of the 275.
Yeah, they would be a little more
Like
concise.
everything that they.
yeah, said anything and everything you think would be interesting.
Yeah.
So no more 990s?
No more, I think we need the full, do
Yeah,
we
I
think?
know, but I mean, that's probably.
It is.
Well, I think, again, that's the thing, is it'd just be nice to delineate what we expect in a complete application, that we can
Right. So, yeah,
decide how many points you get based on whether you make those things that we've spelled
Right.
out.
Are there any documents that the board would expect to see in an application that I can go ahead and jot down today for an upcoming meeting of the committee? It's a letter from a DIO.
I don't know if it's, one thing that the ACG doesn't really ask for until they come for your site visit is the faculty development plan. And if, as a DIO working with new programs, if there's one thing I've now started pushing my programs on, it's that, especially when there are new sites and things like that. It doesn't have to be long, it just can be something, and I'm open to criticism on that, but
Well, that's part of it, and having that, and you have to document that every year in your reporting, so getting them.
Yes, but you don't have to have
Custom
it
to
in your
that.
initial application. I don't feel like that's one thing
That's not bad.
Yeah, again, I think a letter from medical staff leadership saying medical staff is supportive of this and maybe that's where you even include some of like that, including helping get people up to speed to feel comfortable teaching. But then administration with some both
Senior.
sort of philosophical commitment as well as financial commitment. And again, it feels to me like something from the community saying, like to have this residency in our community and where, as a community, whether, you know, it could be from the Chamber of Commerce or the mayor of the town or something like, but it feels like there are a few things that we could delineate that would help us all, help me feel better when I look at it, that, okay, this isn't something that somebody's just slapped together as an idea and they want $500,000 over 2 years. But they really don't have the support they need to even get started.
Maybe they should get one from their state legislator. From the local area, so they're aware of the value.
that's not a bad idea.
Anyone online? Dr. Becker, any comments, recommendations?
The state legislature is brilliant.
Yeah.
Sort of free
Yeah.
advertising.
That is actually pretty
Either your state
clever.
representative or your state senator or
Right.
both.
But that make them aware of the fact that
Yeah,
there's a physician shortage in this area. We want to start a program. We need support.
and if they support the GME board getting the funding to give grants,
Yeah, this is a breakthrough.
yeah.
All right. That gives us at least a few things. So the subcommittee will probably meet once or twice between now and the April meeting and refine some of these suggestions into making it more objective. I mean, we didn't materially change the overall structure. I mean, we really didn't. I think the structure is pretty good. We're just adding granularity of these subjective measures to give applicants the most clarity and ourselves the least amount of uncomfortableness with, making scores that then could determine big things for programs without, hard expectations attached to those scores. And so I think this is a good iteration. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Just one comment, and then Ms. Nagel, you have a clarifying question. I think of the different buckets, this is definitely the one that, I mean, Dr. Dodd, to your point, we should be discussing. I think with the letters, making that explicit and having it be all or nothing, I think that's a total of 20 points I had seen. So, is that 5? Is that 10? Set that benchmark. I do have my question though, the 990 that you mentioned, is that a financial
Yeah.
statement or, I just, one thing I wanted to flag that maybe can be further fleshed out by the subcommittee is, I think it's great that we're trying to limit the volume of pages for each application, but if financial commitment is one of those criteria on which we're going to be evaluating those applications, that could present a challenge. And then, thinking through, what does that mean? I mean, the applicants have
Yeah. I'm
various
trying to think
financial
what I would
resources
call
and like,
it,
what is an
990
objective way through which to look at that?
What I would pull out of a 990 that would change my opinion one way or the other,
Yeah.
really. I mean, as long as they're a not-for-profit and they state they're not-for-profit, we have to, I think, assume that they're doing the things that they would do. What would you be looking for in a 990?
I don't.
Yeah.
And so if we're looking to reduce the administrative burden, there is no way, I mean, you can say you've got a 50-page limit, but then you're gonna have to exclude certain attachments. And you
Yeah,
find
but
that
we need a budget.
We need a budget,
Yeah.
yeah.
We need a budget and what is your
Yeah. Yes.
contribution? And so I think that may be one of the
Yeah,
objectives.
it's a budget.
Is a budget for how the money is gonna be spent and what's your in-kind portion that you have to contribute, because it's 25% for some of these, I don't know.
All the grants are 25 and 75, but
I think it is.
It's for the development, or the new program grants, do we ask them to have 2 million and we have only 5, or we give them only 500, I don't think that's a 25-75. Right,
In the application, it just.
You know what I-
states it's
yeah, I know
match.
that they have to, yeah, the what.
It's
in the
Yeah.
expansion, did they match a 1-to-1 in the program
All
development?
are, the uniform match.
I think it's a program development grant.
Cause the
that
feasibility,
they have
we
to-
don't probably ask them to match.
Yeah, I don't think we, well, I think there is something in there that the organization.
Yeah, well,
I'm almost certain, and we'll update the
Yeah.
RFPs based on what these discussions are, so I will
Yeah.
clarify that for you.
The expansion grants, I don't think it makes sense to ask, because they're all relying on CMS pass-throughs.
Yeah.
And those things anyway, so I don't think, but the program development grants, we want us to see that there's some commitment from the financial commitment from the organization to match percent of what the grant is that they receive.
Yeah. We'll have to look at that.
I can't remember if it's
We'll look at the
20% or
language of the
25%, but
subcommittee,
it's
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. Okay,
And so, yeah, that would be part of a complete application, I think, that we would look for. Something very specific, that here's the budget and here's the amount that the organization is investing.
Correct, versus not necessarily attaching their 90.
Yeah, right, yeah, that's a good point, 990,
yeah.
that's it.
I think they're trying to be helpful, but we don't need all that. Okay, so that gives us some granularity. So, well, yeah, our subcommittee will reconvene for a time or two between now and our next meeting, and then we'll hopefully have something to vote on next and take action on as a board in I think our April meeting is actually bumped up to early May because of a conflict, so like May 2nd or something like that is our next meeting.
Okay. This was a discussion of the board, no proposed changes. And this only applies to feasibility and program development, but the naive specialty or density of residency in the area, this goes by the ACGME website. It goes by, the next closest program, and then the number of programs in the state. So that's how that's been determined so far. The board or the committee did not offer any changes to that. But just a couple thoughts, including specialty into that figure, need of specialty. I had a brief conversation with the Bowen Center about how to determine that. Not necessarily an easy thing to determine, so I think that'd be part of a bigger discussion. But update, recommendation of a 50-page count. It sounds like that's popular with the board. So no real change there. And then the maximum score of 100 rather than 105 for two of those programs. Okay. There was also discussion on moving forward rather than, programs that have been established more than 5 years ago, receiving that baseline, whatever the minimum point level is, replacing that metric with the retention of physicians in the state. The determination of the committee was that this is too early to implement something like that, and the grantees would need to have ample time to prepare for that. But that was proposed to, not penalize those programs for being established, but rather give them something else to aim for. So,
I think someone brought up that other states have done something like this. I can't recall which
I
state.
believe it was Wisconsin, correct, Dr. Knight? Some kind of.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Wisconsin does have a metric in some of their ongoing, what we would call expansion grants. I think they have a different term for it, but sustainability grants or that sort of thing, that they do have, they have a threshold that the program has to be retaining a certain percentage of their graduates in state for them to continue to receive that grant.
So that was offered as a replacement for that metric, sometime in the future, but nothing at the moment. So, what do these recommendations look like? Here is an application that was submitted several years ago and approved. We'll leave the name out, but if the board wants to do a deeper dive, you should all have access to the SharePoint site with Linda Bratcher's summary, the abbreviated application, and the full application, if you would like to go through and make your own determinations about that scoring. You'll see the information from Robert J. Woods. I would have that program in for you. In this application, they did meet rural environment, behavioral health provider, and FQHC, so they would have been awarded that full amount. Originally accredited a long time ago, so they are not receiving points for that. And so if the board was scoring this today, they would have the latitude to award between 45 and 65 points based on that updated scoring. And for reference, this applicant has been awarded several times, so that provides any context.
What, do we know what they did get when we split them? Did you say that?
I can go back and look, that would be a
Like,
little
are
bit
we
of a deeper
like
dive.
way off and way different now with our new scoring system? Like, did it radically?
I can try and find that and do a deeper dive, and offer that at the subcommittee meeting. I'm not quite sure where I can find that, but I'm sure I can. So,
Yeah. I think it might be in the minutes of when we approve those, because we used to call out the
Okay.
scores.
great, well, that will, Make a note of
I
that.
think we possibly did that. That'd be one place.
And then I guess the question is, we have sent it out to the committee for the committee to do their individual scoring. But if we define these things so that they're more objective, do they even need to go to us for scoring, or will the scoring all be sort of automatically done? And then we would have those scores when we consider the application. But then that would sort of take all of the subjectivity out of it. I don't know, is that the goal of this, do you think?
I defer to the board for that.
I don't know, I'm sort of asking myself.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that, but you're right. If we make it so
Fine,
defined,
yeah,
then we may find that individual scoring may not be necessary, but we may want to go through a cycle of a year and like determine that, like, are we in agreement that this is objective, or are we not? Before we just give up the individual scoring, but it'll make it easy, right?
It'll make it easy.
It'll make it really easy for us to click and say, do we agree or do we want to adjust, right?
We'll be quite as invested because we won't have to dig in quite as much and look at it.
Yeah.
That's
good question.
Might be a little too autopilot-y.
Well,
too cruise
yeah.
control.
It's a fair question. I think, but if we do implement this change, we'll have it, I think, I'd say we can discuss as a board, how has that affected our engagement, but really, I think it gets to what we want, is that we want to make sure if these things are included, then we would consider it a good application.
Not sure how that would help us then in the situation we recently had where we had to make a big decision with, So I think the benefit to trying to, believe me, I liked it when you first talked about it, but then I thought, what happens if we don't have enough funds to award all the applications? How will we sort through that?
Well, the default differentiators then become community, density of positions, the HIPSA, shortage, that becomes the differentiator. If everybody's applications are complete and they all have collaborators and they get the full points for that, then it does fall back on these other
Other
things to be the differentiators.
Except that what I noticed with this is how strong the year in the program. So they lose 25 points because they're not a new program. They might be a great rural program that's graduating people that practice in underserved Indiana communities. And yet, if we're going to use this scoring metrics as the differentiation when we get to where we don't have enough money, are we going to be in a situation where you've got a program that's doing great, doing what we want, and yet, this may, potentially make them drop their spots, or even under draconian situations, stop the program. So I did like someone had made the comment in the past about at some point when we can measure outcomes and how many percentage stay in the state, that might sort of erase the 25 points, or we don't make it so much of a percentage of the overall score.
These are good,
Yeah.
I mean, they're good conversation points. I think, yeah, let's talk about it in the subcommittee. I mean, I think that that does drive that will drive that newness of the program would drive the most.
For ongoing program expansion.
Correct.
The only thing I would like the subcommittee to talk about more, consider, or maybe kind of wait and see how things evolve is just let's make sure we don't hold the residencies accountable for things they can't control for certain specialties. If we are losing certain specialties, OB is one of them we're very concerned about. By, people might want to stay, but they decide to practice outside of our state. And I don't want to have a scoring system that penalizes residency programs for things that.
Maybe beyond that.
Yeah. But I do think we need to track if that is occurring so we can go back and show the data. As we as a board are kind of held responsible. That's one of the outcomes that we will be measured on is they're giving us money to increase.
Yes.
Programs and the intent is for people to stay.
And, national data shows that it does work, right? That if you train in the state, you will stay at a rate of like 60-ish% or 65, I don't know, 60, 70, something like that. But if there is a big force, that's, a unique specialty that may not have the same, draw to this state for various reasons on our policy, then that may be one, but that may help us tell our story too. About why we need to, why this is a challenge and we have to have different resources and models to think about because it is hard to retain a certain specialty. But I think Lucas, as we go through our next iteration of our work, part of Lucas's, great work ahead, I think, is to try to help us really get granular with who are we retaining at the individual level from these state grants and how can we tell the story? Are we meeting that 60-70% mark with these funds? And what is the impact? What is the true impact? Because we're making a deduction, right? Deducing that they're probably going to stay at that rate, but we do want our actual data. And then that could drive a change in what Dr. Becker's talking about, right? Maybe instead of how new a program is, it's like how many of them stay might be a driver that would be bigger for us if we felt we had reliable data.
Well, this is great feedback. It gives me a lot to go off of for the next meeting. So, subcommittee members, I will plan to send out another doodle poll to figure out what our availability is, and we'll get rocking on this. Are there any other board members that would like to participate in this upcoming meeting? I will make the effort to record it and post it to the SharePoint site. So if you'll have some context before we get into the May 2nd meeting and actually the board votes on it. And the invitation is open. It doesn't have to be decided today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Feel free. We'd love more votes. Great.
So I believe we're ready for our next item.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the next item, and I don't know if Greg and Lucas, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you want to give like a higher level legislative and, fiscal overview at all before we step into this conversation, because usually we do kind of just talk about the landscape right now in the legislature. Is there anything you guys want to share about that before we dive into these specific topics of our recent presentations in that one pager?
Let me jump in. So the legislative session has begun and is certainly keeping us busy. There have been northward of 2,000 bills filed. We're tracking close to 200 in the K-12 higher education workforce space. But what we wanted to share today, just with regards to the budget bill, is that has been made available from the House. Kind of going backwards and working to that, the state budget committee, received, economic, forecast projections about a month ago. Was not a surprise, with what was discussed. We've kind of known this for a while, that the, 25-27 biennium, which we are, going to be entering, is not as rosy as what, we had last time during the 23-25. So, projections, some modest growth in fiscal year 26. Things will flatline in fiscal year 27. From there, the government is reacting. The Braun administration proposed their recommended budget about a week ago. There are cost saving measures that are within that in a number of places, including with our agency. And kind of across the board, I know we have Brooke from the Department of Health joining us, and the administration is very attuned to that fiscal outlook, and so focusing on efficiency and cuts across state government. Kind of minimum 5%, but that fluctuates in some cases. So that is, just to be kind of upfront, not trying to be a wet blanket, but just those are the fiscal realities that we're encountering. So in the proposed governor's budget, we were listed at 7 million for fiscal year 26 and 7 million for fiscal year 27. That is the same in the House's current budget. And as the board will recall, that is the thresholds at which we were funded during the last biennium. So we take that as a win, especially knowing the cuts to some programs that are taking place. I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. I think this is a program that is, not just strongly supported by the administration, but by both the House and the Senate in both parties. And so we are fortunate to have those current thresholds in the House budget bill. And we will, as we've done in years past, be working with board members, for advocacy. But again, we are pleased where we're at now, and want to have an ongoing dialogue with Chairwoman Hearn and the rest of you as we, kind of navigate this legislative session. But in addition to that, really appreciate some of the advocacy that's been done by some associations, including those that are in this room, for funding. So in addition to collaborating with board members, we'll also continue to work closely with organizations who are supporting the work that we do.
Great. And I think that's a nice segue into a presentation that Chairwoman Hearn and I were able to give to the Indiana Business Health Collaborative. Was that 2 weeks ago now?
10 days ago, yeah.
And so some of this is, things that I think the board is familiar with. But then we did a deeper dive on, referring back to the original figure that Chip Umbach gave us, and trying to kind of give a fiscal amount to what that would actually look like.
Yeah, and just to zoom out a little bit, like this collaborative, Julie Reed, who's here from the ISMA, she helped make the connection and introduction for us to come to that meeting. And that is a lot of people were on Zoom, so we didn't have as many faces in the room as I think what we would have hoped. But people were attending and they very engaged during our presentation. But that is a group of business leaders across the entire state who are very invested in improving the health outcomes in the state of Indiana and are addressing multiple topics. And led by Luke Messer, former Congressman, and so we were thrilled to have the opportunity. They have already been doing some work as a collaborative, discussing the physician shortage and how important it is to improve the overall health of the state of Indiana. And so we went and I think we were able to, with Lucas's help. Lucas did a lot of work in preparing for this meeting to really forecast ahead. What is the big ask? Should we want to truly close the gap that exists between our state and our neighboring states in terms of the ratio of physicians to population, particularly the residents to population? I mean, and thanks to Dr. Knight for some of the slides and data he had pulled to help us prepare for this as well. But it got a lot of attention. And so Lucas, why don't you run through the slides? But that was the audience, and it was, multidisciplinary business leaders across the state were dialed in and I just think very engaged.
And this is a slide from Dr. Knight, so perhaps he can
So
give a
this
bit
is
more
from
justice.
the ACGME on an annual basis, publishes a data book. And so this is all from ACGME data. And when you look, yeah, we rank number 46 in the country. When you take the number of what are called pipeline residency slots. So those are residency slots that lead to your initial board certification. And so those do not include fellowships. But if you just look at pipeline residency slots based on, on population, yeah, we rank number 46 in the country, ahead of a few of the frontier states and otherwise.
We don't have actually any residency programs.
So we're sort of at the bottom, we are at the bottom of the barrel. And it's also reflected if you look at physicians by number of physicians by population of the surrounding states, it tracks with that as well. So, this should be, I always think this is like the most compelling slide. Are you proud that we're at the bottom of the barrel? And if not, then we need to fund more slides. Boils down to that.
No new information here. This is the figure cited by Trip Umbach during the economic impact study. This was performed in 2022. You can see we're kind of coming up on the end of what that figure is. This is driven by retention of physicians in the state. So if that's happening, then this should be what happens according to Trip Umbach. Okay. This is just a breakdown of the board specialties, but the specialties that have received the most funding, that the most being internal medicine, those are larger cohort sizes, PGY. So that's anticipated on my end. Family medicine has the most programs that have been awarded, so that also makes sense. And then psychiatry, which I think is due to a lot of the activity down in southwestern Indiana. So just context on the activity of the board since its establishment. I cannot articulate the slope here for you. That was performed by Excel, but that is the anticipated upward slope of the cost of expansion grants if the board should continue to operate at the same momentum. That's projecting out to 9 million annually for fiscal year 27. Clearly, there's probably a bit up or down from that, but that's just a projection. The board's seen this before, nothing new here. And this is kind of where I think we get into more of what the fiscal costs are. And that's why I'm glad Greg was able to share what that forecast is for the upcoming biennium. Based off of what I was able to find from the current programs, it would cost the board about 13 million or 27 million for the biennium to continue to support the current programs that they have. That is also, the program development grants that will matriculate into residency expansion. Okay, so that is for over the biennium. If the board wants to look at that original figure of a shortage of 817 positions, we've funded 265, so there's a gap of around 550. This figure is looking at 500. And just, for kind of accuracy, if we want to bake in, some 3-year, 4-year, and 5-year, it would cost around 74.2 million. And this is not limited to the biennium. So I don't want anyone to think that we need to have this money by 2028 or else everything ends. This is moving forward. So I guess maybe 80 million is more of a realistic figure if we're looking at 550. Okay, and then this third slide is just a comparison of what those three look like together. So this is meant to kind of stir some discussion among the board about the upcoming biennium, where we currently are in the current programs. And then this just kind of gives an overview of what that looks like. But I think I'd like to kind of stay here and see if the board has any thoughts.
Back up 2 slides from there just for a second, because I think if you're, I'm sorry, one more than that, sorry. There. I think it's important if you are having an opportunity to talk to any of the legislators, there's this sense, I think, that all the money for things like this go to Indianapolis. And this slide is really very clear about the fact that the vast majority of these grants have not gone to Indianapolis and that they are serving outlying areas in the state. And I think that's important for this legislature to understand, because I think there's this sense that, well, we've got this big state medical school and they get all this money, and so why are we just giving them more money? And this clearly, I think, shows that this isn't all this money coming to Indianapolis. And so, it's just, I think, an important concept if you have that opportunity to talk to legislators, because saying 7 million is not enough, we need to go to 13, 14 million a year sounds like, well, what are you doing with all this money? But if you spend a few minutes sort of breaking it down on where all this money's going, and then again, the Trip-on-Bach multiplier effect, you know, it starts to make a pretty compelling picture pretty quick.
The other thing that people were, I think, struck by that we spoke about when we presented the collaborative is that this doesn't cover all the costs. I think they thought like, oh, this is just free money and then, you know, we're sponsoring the whole thing. But they were like, oh, it costs more than this to train a resident, and that's interesting. So we probably need to put, you know, a little bit more granular. It was useful feedback because it's not obvious to them that it costs close to, you know, $150,000 a year per resident amount, or maybe more. Yeah, Cliff, you just shared an article with me, the thing it's more like 230, yeah. You know, so the 45,000 is just an offset of a small portion of what these health systems are having to go through. And with the challenges financially that the health systems are having in terms of their margins and whatnot, then it, you know, it does make it even all the more important that we have these funds to sustain and continue as programs have to decide whether they can keep these programs going. So we got some really useful feedback as people listen in.
But politically, hospitals and health systems right now
That's
are
true.
high on the
That's
list for most of our legislators.
That's
So
very
I
true.
think it is important to talk more about the communities served and the populations served than talking about money going to hospitals and health systems.
That's
That's not a real popular.
Question about the number for the shortage, you know, 800 or 500, whatever it is, we're gonna go out and say the shortage. Is that, are we looking at that and benchmarking it nationally? And also, are we short in that number of physicians and also short in advanced practitioners as well? And the reason why I ask is for multifaceted, one, you know, Allen County, and we have a lot of resources, and it is hard to get to a doctor in Allen County. You get to a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant. And if I'm thinking like a legislator on, I'm gonna lower healthcare costs, that might be okay with, you know, if I'm thinking like a legislator. And I want this board to be ready to kind of think through that and have a physician be able to say, because I'm a strong supporter of, I love my APPs, but I also really believe we need to support and expand our residency program. And I'd like to be able to say, you have a gap in APPs and you have this gap in residents. So we can come in and still support this number, whatever the number is. But it's a real fact that we have, and also kind of maybe a growing resentment that physicians are being asked to train their replacements in some cases.
I feel like, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like the legislature is fairly supportive to physicians. We've got at least 2 physicians in the legislature, Dr. Barrett and Dr. Johnson in Fort Wayne. So there's some support, and they've been pretty supportive.
It all is about money though, and it costs
Yes.
more, so
Yes.
it costs more to have all these residents. What I really just want to make sure we know where we stand on the data for our state, if it's,
What's the APP shortage?
yes, can we come in and say, look, we have a shortage.
Across the
So if they say, well, what about all these nurse practitioners and PAs, because you got all these ads now on TV, you know, showing them as a doctor option. And so people might think that, and, we all know they're not, and, that we need to continue the support for the residency program.
It's been a couple of years, but I wonder if we could invite the Bowen Center back to share their newest. I know they've worked on a whole new set of data this fall, in some of the primary care specialties. And it's just, yeah, it would be helpful to have updated sort of projections from them because, the other thing, when we talk about new residency spots, that's great, but there's also a lot of physicians leaving the
Yes.
workforce. And there's a recognition that somebody who's retiring now, it's not a one-to-one FTE replacement, but a lot of times it's taking two newer physicians to replace one retiring physician. So there's a lot that kind of goes into all that kind of nuance, but it'd be great to hear sort of
Yeah, that's a good
from the
suggestion.
Bowen Center again. Because that was helpful when it came a couple of years ago, I think.
I would say the ISMA, the IOA, the IFP do a lot of advocating around value of training, the number of hours of training that are put into residents versus local collaborators.
Yeah, but it would be great to have our board be well versed in some of this, more current data. So I think that's a great suggestion. Lucas, you could reach out to the Bowen Center and maybe, I know our July meeting will be packed, so if they are available as soon as our early May meeting.
Okay.
Be helpful.
Happy to.
Great.
And then perhaps something will just kind of help with, digesting that, presentation. Our creative director here at the commission has, I think, done a really nice job of updating what that one pager, data sheet flyer was. That was originally, I think, from 2021. So there are some updates to that. And when we're talking about not all of the funding going to Indianapolis, I think this, is a nice graphic that can be supplemented too. And so this is all included in that packet that I sent out. I'm happy to send out the file as well.
Yeah, it might be good for the board members to have it to share as a PDF, individual PDF. Thank you.
I would have printed it today, but I think there is one edit that I'll ask Doug to make is rather than saying slots created, I would probably say funded. Just because we did not say that they were all created. I think it's probably more safe for the board to say that those were funded. That's the one edit that I plan to offer to Doug.
We talk about that number a little bit, because I want to make sure I understand. So when we say over 260 new resident positions and 707 residency slots, so, it sounds, when you say that, it sounds like, well, there's 770 more slots now than there used to be. Well, they paid for those slots, but it's, the top number is really the number of current residents.
Individuals, yep.
Individual.
770 is just
Is the cumulative.
the key.
Yeah, and that's including the general surgery and.
Well, I think it's I think if a family medicine resident could have 3 slots because they would have 3 years.
Right,
Mhm.
so
Correct.
one
Yeah.
resident might be 3 resident slots.
Correct,
Or 4 or 5.
correct. So that's a little confusing, yeah,
770 sounds like 770 more people were trained. And
but
that's-
more years of training.
Yeah,
Just more years
training years.
Yeah,
A general
Funded.
surgeon's what?
training, yeah, it's training years. It may be worth even taking out.
The 200
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
260 is
Yeah.
truly
I
the
think
number of individuals that have been
Correct.
trained in this
Correct.
program. So I
Trained or funded, for
Funded,
260, okay.
additional that were trained as a result of this funding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think the 770, the average recipient of this,
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard for us to even discern it, so I think for people who aren't well versed in
Yeah, that number
residency
threw me off.
education, it'll be confusing. So we can just delete that portion.
Perception.
All right. Well, that is also good feedback, and I'm glad that we talked about that here before we
Yeah.
sent that out.
And I'll tell you, if you scroll down just a little bit, I'm sorry, scroll up, sorry. I'm good at giving a little bit further. I thought that was Caitlin Clark at first. It was like really small on my screen, and I thought, wow, this is brilliant. We've got
Yeah, we're,
Caitlin Clark on our.
If you squint.
It popped up really.
On the other
Yeah,
side.
there you go.
Well, great. I appreciate that feedback, and we'll make that change with Doug. And I'll have that sent out here within the next week, and board members will be able to use that and any communications moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for getting that updated, Lucas, because that's been something I know we wanted to refine and update for a bit of time here, and now it's like, it looks really good, very current, and I think it'll be helpful for us in these important conversations ahead.
On the second page, that's the state that's got the navy in gray. How is it calculated that somebody is Navy? I see the key that says impacted. Does that mean a trainee went there afterwards? or-
Impacted, so those, some of those are from the previous document, that was from Eugene Johnson, so I was able to find that file that he had listed those counties. And then the additions, are either listed in the application, that have been submitted or reported on the ACGME website. So there's a partner site in this city or this
I
county.
noticed Vigo is gray on here, but on the other map, it wasn't. It wasn't. a
Yeah,
gray
so the
It
other
was
map
on the
is where, the programs are based out of. So you'll see this
Yeah,
is
that one.
much less sparse or more sparse.
But I'm just surprised because I think Vigo is blue here. Did I see that right? And it's gray on this one, and I'm kind of like, oh.
I wonder if the difference there is that
I would've thought
the
Vigo
grant
would've
that Vigo got was just recently, they got a discovery grant. They just got.
I would say, yeah, this does not include feasibility studies.
Okay.
Or, well, excuse me,
Yeah, I call it.
this does not include feasibility studies.
Yeah.
Okay.
This, and perhaps that's a good clarity or clarification I should provide is that this is just based off the grants.
Okay.
So anything that shows up on these slides that look like they're from the commission are based just off of my master spreadsheet with grant.
I just assumed everything that was on there would also show up on the other one.
So when we did clarify that, at IBHC, so thanks for that and make that point moving forward.
So I would assume that some of the blue counties are considered in the service area of those grant recipients, and that's why
Mhm.
they're in
Yeah.
the blue. 'Cause there's several, but are blue counties that I'm trying to figure out who claimed them based on the.
Yeah, and I found that file, it was from a few years ago, so I'd be happy to grab that and send that out to the board so they can also look at it.
Is there like a key to the colors? On that
This-
same one, yeah, what do the different colors mean? I'm just
Darker blue, it didn't translate over from PowerPoint to
Okay,
PDF, so in PowerPoint.
trying to figure out what that was.
presentation, darker blue is more funding that's been received.
Okay, so it's just degree of funding or extent of funding.
Top end, just over 10 million, bottom end is a feasibility study. So, the very, very light blues, that's where you can expect, one study, and not all of those continued to program development, which is why you might not see that. But those are the data updates, as of the last few months.
Can I ask a question of the second page of the flyer? It seems like there are several SIGMEC internal medicine, listed there like 4 times. One is prelim, but there's 3 of them. And then I wasn't sure about that. And then also, I wasn't clear about there are a couple of Indianapolis IE programs, psych and emergency medicine. Perhaps that was well before my time on board, most likely, but I was just curious about those.
Those were also before my time. So a good amount of this blue is inherited from the previous one picture.
They were experiencing.
They were expansions, the EM and the IM were both expansions.
I see. So that like every time I expand it, then we add them to the list.
Yeah. We helped them have slots.
Yeah, so maybe they
Yeah,
went from a
they-
class of 8 to
9 or something.
Yeah, and they got a grant for that.
Yeah.
And so that was a new
But
program.
it's not one that we persistently give, those doesn't seem like are ones that.
They haven't come back and continually reapplied some of them.
Okay.
And I'm not quite sure what it would look like, but if the board wants a full list of grants that have been awarded, I'm happy to give that. Greg and I have quite a bit of access to our master file. Not necessarily easy to use, but there's a lot of information there that maybe the board doesn't have as much access to. So I'm happy to kind of break down some of those wells and try and give you some more context.
Yeah, I don't know if another column there would help or not. Number of learners and the number of, then it might get kind of confusing, but
Maybe at least just for us.
Right.
Have that flyers for our legislators,
Right,
get to
because
know what we're talking about.
Because some of them were one-off. Some of those are one-offs, like the prelim year, there was a one-off year that we just approved it when we had funds, and then we decided, you know what, this isn't really the purpose of this, and then we didn't continue to fund that. That is an example, I think, if I remember that correctly. So, you know, and then there were some that they applied, and then they applied for a year to expand, and then they didn't really come back again to it. So the impact is, yeah, the degree of impact and the degree of residence is really not conveyed here. It's more absolute. Yes or no?
Would anybody be interested in a map of what we're currently funding? You know,
With impacts,
yeah.
so something like
Like,
this, but
this,
just
so like, this is
current
great, this is great for historical to show work, because I would think the goal would eventually be all blue, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, it also would be helpful to have something like where our dollars are going.
I could provide more context if that was the situation, because a lot of this was before my time last February. Any feedback online? Dr. Becker?
Yeah, this is from earlier, just so the board knows that $45,000 per resident amount, that was settled on by a workforce that helped get the bill originally passed that was led by the Indiana Hospital Association. And the 45,000 was a sort of a national figure of what the average hospital lost in training a resident, the deficit for programs to be run at the average hospital. And that was including with CMS funding and without CMS funding. So that's where the 45,000 came from. And it was always meant to just sort of incentivize hospitals to be willing to take on residencies in our state. So that they wouldn't walk in always knowing they were going to lose 40 or 50,000 a resident. So that's the historical part of where the 45,000 came from. I think that was the main, and I was going to bring up the point that Jen Choi, seeing all the IM programs at the bottom of the list, when there's one IM program that sort of represented all of those based out of Knox County. So that was confusing to me too.
Well, that's good feedback. I'll watch this video back, just make sure I'm hearing everything correctly, and I'll collaborate with Doug. And so, Dr. Hearn, perhaps you and I can talk about when would be appropriate to actually publish that.
Yeah, there may be a few little revisions, but we want to get it out there, that's for sure. So, we can connect on that. Wonderful. Well, thanks for the feedback and the discussion. And I think, you know, with the news that the appropriations for the next biennium are the same, you know, we have our work cut out for us to keep doing the good work
We
of,
can keep lobbying to
right,
increase that number, but.
absolutely.
But it's nice to know that may be the lowest that we would get. It doesn't sound like we're at risk of not being funded. But
There's continued support but how do we grow that support and get, really tell the story? Very, you know, and I think there was, I think we've had some good opportunities lately. I think we're gonna get some invitations based on being at that meeting that we were at, last week, Lucas and I, that, you know, people had an interest in this. They people were asking questions like, you know, what about private funding and what are some other opportunities? What are other states doing? I mean, there was just some real, rich appetite to help solve this issue. And yeah, what are the other states doing? And I know like Julie Reed from the ISMA reached out to us, and we were looking at an article Cliff Dr. Knight had found about Iowa and what they're doing. And so we're going to try to dig into a little bit more of what other states are, learn from them and connect with them.
I'm gonna add one more to that mix. I know Minnesota and Utah both have something that they were doing through Medicaid, and I'm not gonna suggest that our Medicaid pay for it. It's something that runs through federal government.
That's actually very timely.
Actually, Dr. Hearn and I talked about this earlier this week. because I learned about this from talking to the founder of a GME consortium in New Mexico. And when I was telling him about our grant program here, he said, well, how much, are you getting matching federal funds? And I said, none that I'm aware of. And so he explained that, yeah, through it, and so this will be more to you guys than me, and I'll start sounding, I'm going to say it like I know what I'm talking about. So through intergovernmental transfers and state program amendments, SPAs, that you can take the money that the state appropriates, you send it to the feds, it goes through Medicaid, comes back to Indiana 2 to 3 times as much as we send out, but then the money comes from Medicaid to the residency programs, rather than from UGB board. And if that's working in other states, it sure seems like.
Yeah, I just learned about it about a month and a half ago, and so I have tried to dig into it myself and I can't find it.
Yeah, I tried to Google it too after, Cliff and I talked about it, yeah.
But I know that I think Utah is the one, and I've talked to one of the DIO of University of Minnesota, and they are getting involved in that process as well. So.
Yeah.
So it could change our lives.
So is there, who at the state level would need to be willing to look at that whole process? Because I'm,
Is it for billable business or is it just to come back to the residency?
I think it's for GME but I don't, that's why I don't have any of those details.
I ask only because of the partnerships of the FQHCs with the residency programs currently in our state. That would be the thing to look at.
It feels a little bit like that,
Yeah, it does. If we get the enhanced Medicaid reimbursement rate that helps offset the cost of the continuity clinic. And I was even curious with that $45,000 loss that Dr. Becker cited, if that was the assumption of the hospital running the continuity clinic. If you separate that out, I'd be curious about that number, if that's still $45,000 for the hospital, or what it would be. But yeah, it's something to think about.
right, and that's an on average. 'Cause
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
problem is,
yeah.
one hospital may be getting $130,000 a year per resident, another hospital $190,000 per year per resident. And the most recent thing that I've seen published in academic medicine said it costs about $225,000 to $230,000 per year per resident. So there's definitely a gap. And the 45,000, I think it was indicated, was a sense of that be the average amount that a hospital spends on top of what they get from Medicare, from CMS. So it's filling that gap, but that gap obviously continues to expand. And the numbers that sort of drove this home to me, and I'm using, I should probably talk to Rob and make sure he's okay with me sharing that, is they're getting about $1 million a year right now for their psychiatry program. You pull that $1 million a year out, how does a hospital like Good Sam, a small hospital in Vincennes, Indiana, how do they make up that $1 million to pay for their psychiatry residency? So, I mean, this truly is, if we don't continue to increase the funding, new programs that have started over the last few years are at risk of going away. And it's, so, 45,000 a year doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you multiply it by the number of residents, it gets pretty big.
Over
pretty
many
quick.
years, yeah. But do you have any thoughts on that, Greg? You might be able to dig into that.
Yeah, hearing that, Dr. Nye, I mean, we're certainly happy to kind of take a first stab at looking through, if you could send that to Lucas, anything that you have available, and Dr. Troy, I mean, that would certainly be above us, as it relates to a decision, but I think, us kind of taking a first stab and, bullet points, this is, the purpose, how it works, how we could, benefit from it. We would then share that with the CFO of the education vertical, who is Seth Hinshaw. Ultimately, I think that would be, a conversation that he would have to have with others, or something that we, could and wanted to pursue.
Yeah, I would think the course of truth would be whoever the state's expert on Medicaid financing of federal matching funds. That would be.
I've reached out to, the Minnesota DIO, and I'll see if she can send me something.
Yeah, we're happy to take a look and kind of start there, but that's.
Yeah, I'm happy to give just a little bit of like current Indiana context on those IGTs and the matching funds. So the IGTs right now are what's used to fund HIP those hospital assessment fees that are done through the IGTs that get sent to the feds and they get matching funds and those come back multiplied, right? And that's how we fund HIP 2.0. There's legislation this session right now to kind of modernize, if you will, the hospital assessment fee to leverage additional dollars from the federal level and redistribute, kind of more equitably distribute how those hospital assessment fees are distributed across the entire state, across kind of big and small hospitals, and the hospital associations kind of carrying that and has been working kind of day and night. They've got a ridiculous amount of kind of work put into this. That all goes through FSSA. Ultimately, Metro testified at the committee hearing this week about kind of the work on it. He was the architect of it 1.0, and now they're kind of looking at this as maybe a 3.0 in some ways. And so that kind of all eyes are on those IGTs and how those federal dollars can get leveraged at the moment for that piece. So there's a fair amount of expert. Yeah, those intergovernmental transfers,
Okay,
they got, I'm
gotcha.
sorry, they got referenced earlier.
Yes.
I apologize for that. So, you know, there's a lot of attention and a lot of discussion about it right now. And I think once they get over the hump of the hospital assessment fees, they're talking about implementing a new Medicaid managed care assessment fee, which is basically a tax on the Medicaid MCOs, managed care organizations, to help fund some of this work. Then I think, you know, there'll be a fair amount of recent experience with all of those things that have happened. But
So that's the hospital association.
the hospital association is running point on that at the moment, right?
So it sounds like they have some knowledge about these topics.
There are a few of them that do. It's extraordinarily complicated, and there's a few in the state, like Metro, who've been around for a long time, but, you know, funding
But
is funding.
ultimately, this too would impact hospitals, because that's who funds most of those programs. What about private investment too, like Lilly Foundations and other entities? I know it looks like Lily's more around education, religion, that than health, but yeah.
Do you want to, that came up at the
Yeah.
business collaborative. I think it's, you know, it's, well, go ahead, Julie. Do you want to?
Yeah, all I can say is, having attended the IVHC meeting, and these guys did an excellent job. I mean, you've seen the presentation. It was great. It was great having them there. They did an excellent job. Eli Lilly, not the foundation, but Eli Lilly is a member of the IVHC group, along with us and a lot of others. And, they were in the room for the presentation and, are committed to ways to figure out ways to kind of, support, you know, the workforce. I would strongly encourage not talking about that publicly, because if the legislators catch wind
Yeah.
that somebody else could pay for it instead of them, then that will be the answer and the discussions will be over. So I would strongly encourage kind of keeping that under your lids, but, I do know there's interest out there if that comes a possibility. The other strong encouragement that I talked to Luke Messer about this just a couple days ago, again, about kind of an advocacy plan to support you guys' efforts and frankly push, so that if there does end up being a few extra $1 million laying around come April, we can push for like, hey, the GME board actually doesn't need 7, they actually need 14. And if you've got 3 or 7 extra $1 million laying around come April, like they actually need it. The strong encouragement from Luke Messer was like, hey, Julie, like continue to plant a seed that as those board members work on advocacy for their ask, like the need is 14, right? It's not 7, and really lay that track for that future growth, even if it doesn't happen this biennial.
So,
And 14 was what, Sherpa Humbach had projected us at.
no, 14, I think it's our own internal projection of what we would need to fund the current programs that we're funding fully. Because remember, we were at like, what, 11 million last year at that one meeting. And so to be
We're
able
gonna
to,
go from 11 to 7.
well, what we did last year is we just funded the first couple of years of the programs in order to get through this scenario of not having adequate funds to support all of the programs. So we actually need to double what we're currently getting to be on a sustainable full path to support the current programs fully. Otherwise, we start to get to that point where, yes, the older programs may fall off or whatever would
Or
fall
we
off
stop
based
adding
on.
new.
Correct.
as a reminder, the board received applications for 10.07 million in July. That included one program development and one feasibility. My recollection is 6.3 million, 6.36 million was awarded, with those modified grant terms of 2 years rather than
The full, yeah,
still at the $45,000 per resident though.
yeah. So we need double right now. This is really the story.
Because there were years we had more to spend than we were being allocated because we have surplus from previous years. And so now we've spent through all of the carryover.
Yeah.
From previous years, and that's why it feels so acute right now, I think, is that.
Yeah.
We don't have
But
that.
we're never gonna get surplus. I mean,
No, we don't.
We aren't gonna
we're not
build
asking
that
for
up.
sur- we're not
Right,
asking for
but
surplus.
we'll never need more.
We need that is,
more,
that
lots
is the
more.
take home. We
And
need
7 is
more and a
good.
lot more. We need
Even if
more.
7 is good, because it's not a cut, it's still,
It's inadequate.
we're gonna have to
It's
do
inadequate.
something dramatic.
Right, so it's, yeah, so, but now I think we've got a clear story of like, okay, we need double right now to even sustain and then to help chip away at the big gap that exists between us and these other neighboring states. We need like, up to 4 times more potentially, or whatever, 3, 4 multiplier versus the 2 just to get through current state. So I think that was, a simple message, a clear message, and backed by data, and people were responsive. So, so we have to enlist partners to help us with this message, and that was, I think, part of that work, so.
Yeah, if we're getting 7 from the state, then we're gonna have to get 3.5 from Medicaid, another 3.5 from private entities, and then another bunch more to even grow it.
Well, and there's other states that have a precedence of allocating a lot more to this problem. And particularly when you think of where we fit in the scheme of the frontier states and us, then I think it's a compelling story where, I'm sure Indiana legislators don't want to be that far behind in having a physician workforce compared to other states. So we just have to keep telling the story and showing the return on investment, showing these people stay in the state, showing the data that we have. And I think there's possibility for good traction, but it's gonna take a lot of attention and voices to be heard. So the more we can get out there and share that message, the better. But I think we're in a good spot in terms of I think we caught some people's attention. There's no doubt about it. That thing.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yeah.
I know that a couple upcoming presentations, one from, the IBHC presentation, we were approached, about giving a presentation sometime in August. The requester is escaping me, but that's one, towards the end of the summer. And then, in March, the rural GME has asked, myself and someone from the board to participate in a presentation as well. So those are 2 that are kind of on the calendar right now. Probably expecting a few more show up.
And rural GV, that's a national.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are. I think we've covered a lot of the content. Good discussion today. Any last things from the board member, and then I'll switch to public testimony. Okay. Yeah, we have some guests here today from the public. Anyone want to share anything with the board who's in attendance today? Brooke?
I will, Brooke Mullen, Department of Health, to comment on Dr. Knight about the work that the Bowen Center has been doing. Actually, Lucas has been very helpful in giving lots of numbers. So we have completed a medical education pipeline to practice study with the Bowen Center that looks at family medicine, pediatrics, and OBGYN specialties. I'll have the draft on that by Tuesday of this week. I'll be sharing it with our subcommittees and our council, and I'll send it to Lucas so that he can share with you guys as well. So would love to have any feedback or comments you have on that. Hoping to really get that ready for the legislator as well too. So
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I guess I'll just do a brief introduction. I think I've pretty much met everybody, but maybe thank Dr. Bernhardt. I'm Rachel Reed. I am the Associate Chief Medical Officer at Columbus Regional. I am like, what are you, that strange person was in the room?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Tom Sonnerman is retiring, April 1st. Well, sort of moving into a transitional role and fully retired at the end of the year. And so, he had put me forward as, to be ISBA's representative on the board, awaiting the appointment with the new administration, right? So, just here visiting as a public member, at the moment, but hopefully we'll be able to join, appointed to join and excited. I really enjoyed this conversation. And I have like a little list of things I need to learn more about now. Learn more about these grants and other things. So this is just.
Well, just know that you're welcome as a public member today. We hope we get to officially welcome you at a future meeting. And there is a learning curve to being on this board. So do not feel that you have to master it all right away. Ask a lot of questions because honestly, sometimes our newer members ask questions that those of us who've been around a while still even scratch our heads and say, "You're not- why did people ask questions?" So, yes, I've seen you on our emails and welcome. And we hope that process goes really, it's accomplished before our next official meeting in early May. Okay, fantastic. Any other folks? Eric, our student advisory member? I always want to give our students a chance to share any reflections if they would like to. No pressure.
Yeah, no, I enjoy the conversation. It's exciting to see where the board's headed for this next year and the next following years. My only question I had was, Lucas, where's that flyer going to be published when it gets done?
Yep, so that will be posted on the Graduate Medical Education Board webpage on the commission's website. I can send you the address, and then I will also put it in the SharePoint site. Maybe a good thing to touch on. So one of my goals here at the commission is to try and implement our GCC license a little bit more. And so part of that will be trying to accomplish file sharing with the board members and advisory members through SharePoint. So I hope that everyone here or all the board members have access to that. If you don't, please let me know. I'll get that fixed. It'll also be kept there. Perfect. Okay.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? All right, well then hearing none, then I will we will see everyone at our next meeting, May 2nd on a Friday, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting today.
So moved.
All right. All right, and I presume everyone's in favor, so you're free to go. Stay warm, and we will see you all in early May.
Oh, it's working.